Hey, what's up Ninja fans? Today, quick update video. I have updated the budget file list like some people requested on the channel, so you can find the link down in the description. And I've also updated my full-on personal constructed format file list as well. The updates were relatively easy in the end. I tried a couple of different builds. I tried to try a bit of the greedy file list that only runs a couple of blues, and I tried to change things up a bit, like adding stuff like Command and Conquer and such, because I did see those perform rather well over in the Battle Hardened. However, for the time being, I decided to keep things simple. I added in 2 copies of Rising Resentment and 3 copies of Blue Snatch. Why these, you might ask? In the past, I was already considering to add these in here, and I used to run these instead of stuff like Soulbeat Strike and Mind State of Tiger. However, these have kind of become staples in my deck now because of my personal playstyle, especially thanks to that 3 block value associated with it, and the fact that the Mind State of Tiger lets you pop off with these giant out of war turns if you can time one of these onto the board at the right time, like you just play it. Like the way I do it is that I keep this in my arsenal, and the moment that I draw into an Art of War, I just play the Mind State of Tiger that turn, and I put the Art of War into my arsenal, and then when my turn rolls around, I have the Crouching Tiger, which I can then banish with the Art of War to get an additional attack out of it, which is very nice. But yeah, the Snatch package has been working well for me. Like the Soaring Strike is of course a very nice combo in combination with the Snatch. You could of course argue that maybe instead of the Rising Resentments we could run 2 copies of Blue Soaring Strike, because then we have that similar effect that we can banish one of our Snatches or even an E-Strike or something to give it go again. However, I think losing Belittle has been quite painful for the deck, and sometimes resource efficiency is still a bit of a problem, so I think having the Rising Resentment as like a small attack going in as Chain Link 2 or 3 is quite useful in order to try and sneak that hit in to give something like a Soaring Strike a reduced cost, and that can be quite useful in general. Or even a Spreading Flames, if you happen to play one of these quite late, it can be quite good. How does the deck perform in the current format? It's a bit rough, I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit rough, especially if you're up against an ultimate stuff like that. Previously you could kind of wait until you have like your big pop-off turn, play your Belittle, and then going all in like that to kind of catch the ultimates off guard. However, without that additional attack, we're now looking at like a -4 to 5 or even 6 damage depending on how many Salt Wounds you are planning to play in that turn, which is rather significant because previously we were looking at these big combo turns that were able to present 40 plus damage. These have now been nerfed to 34 plus damage, which is still a lot of damage, but keep in mind if your opponent keeps their full equipment as well as a full hand for blocking, then you can only really leak through like 20 or 22 damage or so in most cases. And if you use your Art of War turn a little bit too early, that can be a bit awkward, because then you are able to, without a doubt, push your opponent from 40 to maybe 20 life. But as we all know, Fai doesn't want to be in the end game, and usually at the time that you play your Art of War, you kind of need to push your opponent to a break point where they have to start blocking with cards from their hand every single turn. Otherwise you just lose the race, because the generic value that Fai pushes every turn is a bit too fair for what it wants to do. Like usually you're pushing like 12 damage or so, or sometimes 15, which is relatively easy for most decks to block. So being able to pop off properly with the Fai deck now post bans is a little bit harder than it used to be, but that's okay. I mean, for most Fai players out there, and this is something that I also mentioned over on Twitter in the past few days or so, I think there's a lot of Fai players out there that never really learned the breakpoints for Fai in general. And what I mean by breakpoints is that you need to really think and consider when you do your Art of War turn, like how much damage am I going to be able to push with my current hand, given that you probably have something like a Master of the Pouncing Lynx on the board, given that you already have some knowledge when you do commit to your Art of War, like in terms of which rats do you already have in hand, because we're now in a situation that because we are running more blues in the main deck, even if you do go like a double Art of War, like a Snatch is only gonna be coming in for 4, which is a lot less damage than just drawing into a straight up red like we used to do. So things have become a little bit more awkward than they used to be. So the way to mitigate this loss in value from the belittle is that when you do go into your Art of War turn, make your Art of War turns count. So sometimes that means that you need to push your opponent a little bit lower than you normally would, and you need to constantly keep in mind, like, if I'm up against this opponent, like how much are they able to block in the next turn, like how much equipment do they still have available to them, and you need to calculate, like, can I push them to 7 or 8 life if they block with the full hand and if they block with the full equipment. If the answer is no, it's probably better off to not do your big combo turn yet. Of course, there is something to be said that you do your combo turn anyways to kind of leak through a bunch of damage in the hopes that maybe you draw into a second copy of Art of War on a future turn, or like an additional copy of Spreading Flames, which is something we did see in the Battle Hardened top 8 last Saturday, or maybe it was the Progress, one of the two, that Fai player managed to get some Art of War turns off back to back, even though that each individual Art of War turn was kind of mediocre in general, and even though they still had the belittle package available to them. So you need to be a little bit more sneaky and crafty about when you do play your Art of War and when you don't play it. On the one hand, that's good, because that means now as a Fai player you need to be a little bit more strategic, which is something that previously I felt was a bit lacking with the go white aggro strategy. Like strategy wasn't really a thing at all, and it's something that I see a lot of players struggle with now, but it still hurts. It's quite a hit to the deck. The deck is definitely still viable, it's still playable. I think, is it still S tier though? I'm not sure. Like, I think Fai is a very strong A tier plus. I think the S tier decks are definitely still decks like Icelander. I guess Ultimate in a way is S tier as well. But I'm not sure if we can still consider Fai like the really S tier, simply because there is a little bit more setup required, and when there is more setup required, there is more risk involved, because if you need to set up for an extra turn, and let's say that your opponent suddenly comes in with something like a pummel and makes you discard, that means that that turn you're not going to be able to pop off, and if they then keep doing that back to back, then you're in a bit of trouble. Or if you're up against an Icelander, for example, if you need to wait an extra turn before you can go into your combo, that could actually mean that they just drawn into their Channel Lake Frigid, they plunk that down, and your combo turn is kind of ruined, which is a bit problematic. But still a fun deck, still very good. I will put the deck link down in the description for everyone that is watching now, so that you can go check this out. In terms of the budget list, it's very similar. Like, I cut all the expensive cards, like the only, except Art of War, of course. You cannot play this deck without the Art of War, that's just the way it is. But the deck is still very viable, very solid deck, and I think most people will be able to get a significant amount of value out of this if they want to. So what am I gonna do with Fai next? I'm still in the process of changing the deck up a bit. What I kind of want to try, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea, is I want to increase my Rising Resentments to a full rainbow package. That means that I want to have like 3 copies of Rising Resentment Blue and 3 copies of Rising Resentment Yellow, and then I'm looking into actually including some stuff like Command and Conquer back into the main deck. I know it's a 2-cost, however, I do think having a bit more of a mid-rangey game plan as Fai in general can be quite valuable, and I've seen Command and Conquer in the deck perform rather decently in the hands of other Fai players, which is something I do want to test and kind of play around with a little bit. I'm not sure now that we don't belittle anymore if adding something like Command and Conquer is viable at all, because previously, of course, Command and Conquer was great if you have like an excess of resources available to you, and then playing it at the end of the turn is something that I've never done myself, but I feel it's a very good move in general. But I want to at least give it a try. I want to test it out, like adding a bunch of Rising Resentment Yellows, adding some Command and Conquers, and see if there's any, how to say, if there's any credibility or any any use to playing it that way. Also, since we do run more blues in the deck now, I think having some higher value attacks like Command and Conquer can be quite valuable, because if you do draw into multiple blues, which does happen now, it happens rather frequently, then at least you have like a big attack that you can play instead. And especially with stuff like Soaring Strike, if you can give Go Again to a Command and Conquer, which is not too hard to pull off, you only need to be on Chainlink 3 and then you can already pull it off. It can be quite devastating for the opponent. It can be really nice to do it that way, or even the Mounting Anger, being able to get like a Command and Conquer coming in for 7 if you're not even in a out of war turn. It's just very strong stuff. Also, the Ancestral Empowerment is a card that I'm now starting to wonder if I should cut it. However, if I do go with a full Rising Resentment yellow and blue package, then the Ancestral Empowerment becomes more powerful, because that way I can maybe sneak in an additional resource off the back of one of these as well, which can be quite nice. So I might cut the Ancestral Empowerments entirely, or I might just increase them to a full 3-off package. I'm not sure yet. Probably gonna be a 2-off, or either a 2-off or either cutting them entirely, but I just need to see how that goes. Of course, when I do update the deck, I will put the deck list available first on my Patreon. Unfortunately, I cannot upload 5 decks on my YouTube every single week. I know there's a couple of people that ask me like, hey, can you just keep updating on YouTube whenever you have a update available? I want to, however, it kind of ruins my YouTube algorithm if I keep uploading the same topic over and over and over, if that makes any sense. But for those of you that are subscribed to my Patreon, don't worry. If I do a major update to this deck, you are one of the first ones to see, and you're one of the first ones that will be able to get their hands on it. So no worries there, the deck list will be available on Patreon if so. Anyways, I will start working on some other decks first the coming weeks. I still want to update Lexi. I was in the middle of it when the ban list hit, but I guess I just need to start over a bit, see if there's any point to playing Lexi in the current format. I also want to do a tier list again. I was kind of planning to do a tier list today. However, I feel the data that I have available up until now is not really enough to be able to get a consistent tier list out there. Like, keep in mind, I'm spending a little bit less time on data collection nowadays, and I'm now more focused on building a casual play scene. So you do have to wait for the tier list a little bit more to like get a little bit more data before I can make like a relatively close statement of what the metagame is or is going to look like in the next month or so. I'm going to try to do the tier list by next week though. I think around next week I should have enough data points available to me to have a bit of a better overview about the meta in general. Like right now we've seen a lot of the ice decks going to the very top, and I do think the ice decks are definitely S tier. However, I also think that a lot of people were kind of underprepared for the ice meta in general, so I want to see what people do to adjust to it. Maybe they don't adjust to it and it's just going to be an ice meta for the remainder of the next 2 months until Outsiders releases, but it's kind of interesting. We're in a very weird spot in the meta right now. Personally, I think the bans were unnecessary. We had a very varied meta before this, but I guess LSS is seeing something that we are not, and do keep in mind they have a lot more data available to them than we do, and it might very well be that some of the bans that were pushed now are because otherwise Outsiders may not function the way they wanted to function, so we need to wait and see what Outsiders is going to give us. For one, I'm super excited that I can start playing Assassin soon. The things that were revealed on Twitter and such past few days from the calling are very interesting. I really like all the little disease tokens like Frailty, Pox and everything, so I'm kind of curious how the stealth mechanic is gonna work. I saw a lot of theories out there. I'm starting to think that stealth might be something like if you play from Arsenal it cannot be blocked. That's what I'm thinking, that kind of feels like a sneaking mechanic to me, but let me know down below, what do you think sneak is going to be, not sneak, what stealth is going to be like, because I'm very curious, I'm very interested to see what it's gonna be like. Anyways, that's all for me for today. Very short video, I know I kept rambling on. If you want more information about how to play the Fai deck, I have plenty of videos on the channel available as well. I might do a gameplay video soon for Fai for the new players out there to kind of go through all my thought process and how I play things the way I do, so that maybe some players out there that want to pick up the deck can do so and perform rather decently. But yeah, I'm still happy with the deck. It's not as super S tier as it used to be, but it's probably better that way. Like, it's still a solid deck, and it can definitely get into top 8 if it gets a little bit lucky. So let's all keep enjoying this deck, and I will see you all next time with another video. Take care.